What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Elevate Your Grind, brought to you by the Cannabis Lab. I am your host, Todd Rosales, and we are back from MJ BizCon. We have made it through Thanksgiving. We have Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, the rest of the holidays leading into New Year's. Hopefully, I can continue to record some shows with the schedule going on, but things are starting to get holiday hectic here. So we'll see what's going on. My guest today, I'm really excited about. This is actually a business partner of mine. I got to meet him in person at MJ BizCon. We were supposed to record this live at MJ BizCon. I'm actually glad we didn't, because I'm going to get more time with him now, because I think it's an absolutely great thing for the industry. I've had many people tell me how amazing my guest is. I'm excited to find out firsthand myself. In fact, one of my colleagues had said that he asked him to be his dad, and I thought that was pretty cool. So with no further ado, please welcome Dotan Melech, from the CEO of CTrust. Dotan, thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. And I do have the dad look, the typical dad look. So
the
I
gentleman
guess
who asked you to be his dad is a little too old for that to happen, but it's
young spirit though, young
there's
spirit.
nothing wrong. I am fully embracing the dad thing, even though I'm wearing a flannel shirt and a backwards hat like I'm Tony Hawk from 1989. But I love the
You
dad
are,
thing. I've got a
yeah.
4 and 2-year-old, and I am embracing it.
There you go. I
So
got 4 kids, so I've experienced in being a dad.
very cool. Well, Dotan, what you guys are doing at CTrust, I think, is awesome, because I think a lot of people have thought about it, but nobody's actually executed on it. Why, I don't know, especially with the state of the industry right now. So if you don't mind, typically I kind of assume that everybody knows what everybody does by the time they watch this show, and I've realized that's not the case. So can you give us a little background on CTrust and what you guys do in general?
We're a credit risk rating and monitoring. We'd like to see ourselves as an agency, a neutral third party, non-associated, non-affiliated, that have had the opportunity to be exposed to a lot of distressed assets in the space and learn by elimination what are the things that companies should be aware of or careful of, and to avoid the worst case, and that's losing their business. And as a result, we developed a formula that actually later on evolved into a fintech solution and a software that allows companies, their lenders, their stakeholders, and their supply chain to evaluate and monitor risk. And we all know that in today's environment, it's much needed.
1,000%. Not even like a little bit relative. It's funny. I don't know if you saw it, and if you did, I'm sure it made you a little bit happy going into MJ Biz. There are a ton of posts, and you see it now. People just saying, hey, why can't you guys pay your bills? You better pay your bills before I see you posting about your suite at MJ BizCon and all those things. But it has become a real problem, right? And I look around, and there are so many great companies out there. I remember when I was interviewing for Green Check, and I had interviewed for a couple positions, and I remember one of them, and I won't call the company out, but one of my first questions was, are your customers paying you? And they're like, what do you mean? I go, in the reality of where we are today, with people having to do cash flow management, and what I say by that is triaging their bills, paying the ones that are the most important down to the least important as far as their ability to operate. I believe that this company, although a extremely nice luxury, was not a necessity. And my first assumption was, I guarantee you your number one problem is not anything from a business process standpoint. It is people paying you. And they're like, yeah, that is a huge problem for us right now. And, how do you even know who to work with at this point? So where I believe that the fruition of CTrust is you looked around, said, who are we supposed to work with? Maybe we should be the people who kind of curate that.
Absolutely. I think cash flow is an issue, especially when companies cannot leverage their cash flow. Being able to handle short-term debt or long-term debt requires a little bit less burden from a cash perspective from a company. If they had the ability to leverage, they probably would have paid timely and more companies that they rely on to be successful. This is a house of cards, that could potentially fall apart if companies don't pay for services and goods that they need to survive, and what the outcome is detrimental.
Yeah.
So definitely being able to differentiate the good from the bad, differentiate the responsible companies that know how to manage those resources wisely, and also are worthy of obtaining debt. I mean, if you think about it, credit worthiness is almost impossible to evaluate in today's environment. How do you know? We're talking about paying bills, which is the fundamentals of best practice in business. What about paying debt,
Yeah.
which is normally used to pay your bills? Um, so I think we got a problem that could grow exponentially if we don't do something about it.
I couldn't agree with you more because there are also a lot of people that are not great at cash flow management too. I mean, I'll be 100% transparent. I was part of a startup. We had a business plan to raise 2 million. We raised 1.1, and at some point it came down to who do we pay and how much do we pay them? And it was more so, we spent more time negotiating with our the people that we owed money to than we did actually operating the
Yeah.
business, which was ultimately the downfall. But I remember thinking like, okay, well, we got to pay the 3PL because if we don't pay the 3PL, then merch can't get out. We got to pay the packaging company because we need packaging to be able to make money and everything else like that. And there were luxuries like data and CRM systems and things like that, where it's like, well, if we lose this, we can still technically operate. Like it would suck. And it is funny. I noticed that you said earlier, like, it's not that these people are purposely not paying their bills. They just don't have the money to. And I think, I don't think that we were the exception to the rule in the fact that we had a business plan and took actions to assume we were going to raise a certain amount of money, did not
Right.
raise that money, and then all of a sudden we're in a position where we had to scramble and figure out and rework the business plan. Now, how do we do it with half the amount of money than we thought we were going to have when we've already spent, you know, as if we were going to have the full two? Do you think that's, where we are in this industry right now? It's just truly a sea of startups that, most startups don't make it. And we look at the industry, we have, people are saying 25% of the industry is profitable. You have all the ancillaries are startups, all the primary companies are startups. There are very few blue chips in this industry.
I would say yes, it has a lot of the components of the industry are of a startup, um, because it's groundbreaking. There's no precedent or something that you can actually base your models on. So there's a substantial or large R&D, if you will, that took place for a while. But I think this is phasing out. I think that the startup mindset, which is a constant capital raise. Let me ask you a question. You were part of a startup. When you were focusing on raising capital, how much time did you focus on actually getting the business done? It's a lot of effort to raise capital, and really, planning for it and executing takes as much time, and you have to juggle, right, between raising capital and doing the work that is necessary to get to the finish line. Another aspect that I think a lot of these companies fail to do is really chop up the work in smaller increments. Like I've never seen a company here in cannabis managing their operation on a 14-week cash flow. That's a common practice outside of cannabis, which is where I come from. Other than the last 5 years, I've been exposed to a lot of things that kind of what became the genesis of CTrust. But I don't see companies managing their cash flows on short terms, on a quarterly basis, managing their goals against their cash needs. These are the things that startups struggle with. So I think I would say, how did you get to a point where you ran out of money and you owe more money than you have? Well, you got to go back and look at your milestones and look at what did you accomplish, and did you create value that is at least as much as the money that you raised or the proposition that you sold investors when you ask for their money. Other people's money need to be managed very carefully, more so than your own,
Yeah.
because you have to answer to other people. And I think the way you avoid going out of business, if you will, or becoming another failed startup, and I know the study, I know the numbers, 95% fail, 5% go above, or 4% above, you get to 10 years, and only 1% survive after 10 years. That study was released a long time ago, and it may apply to cannabis here. The difference, or the major difference that I see, is that governments or local states are stakeholders.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily available in any type of startup. And I think that the government should pay attention to the industry and be part of the effort to preserve as much value as possible. Our goal here is to preserve value, not to see companies go out of business
Yeah.
or get to a point where they can go out of business. We need to preserve the value that was created um, during this 10-year, if you will, and start looking at things a bit differently.
But
I
see,
guess
that's
it's
what
a
excites
long-winded
me.
answer to a short question.
Well, that's the whole point of podcasts. So it just shows that you're a good podcast guest. The people who just answer me with like one word direct answers, I'm like, hey,
It's
we got
not
an
their
hour to fill.
position.
No, we got an hour to fill here. This is entertainment, people.
Yeah.
Um, that's the thing though. I can see somebody, especially somebody who's part of a I don't want to call it a sinking ship, but a company's that's going in the wrong direction, being scared of someone like you coming to town, thinking like, oh, the cops are here. They're going to put a bad label on us and no one's going to want to do business with us. No, that's not the intention. That's never the intention. There are, and I know this, a lot of people that either want to lend to or even getting to the point, make equity investments back into the cannabis industry. There are a lot of distress assets out there. There are a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of, the number one rule with investing, buy low, sell high. There are a lot of opportunities to buy low right now and buy great companies. And that doesn't mean predatory buying. It means giving a second chance to a company that otherwise wouldn't be around to survive. And when I see someone like you come in and say, and start working on a credit rating system to give the people confidence to start allocating capital, whether it's equity capital or debt capital, back to the industry, I think that's the number one way that we spark the second rush of the green wave coming back in here, because it will give investors and lenders confidence to deploy that capital again. At the very freaking least, it will give the person who made the decision to pull the trigger a defensible argument when they get in trouble later on. So that's what excites me most, is I believe that you guys are going to enable the next wave by giving people confidence to deploy their capital again.
That's the goal. Absolutely. If we can bring capital into the companies that deserve it and work hard to create and preserve their value, mission accomplished. That's the goal: is to responsible lending and help companies also have visibility into their own issues as it relates to risk,
Yeah.
because risk management is a difficult thing to do when you are trying to run a company and you have a million different data points coming from everywhere, and you're trying to assess where you at, right? Where are you at in this equation as compared to your peers in the same county or the same city or the same state, or even compared to your peers in other states. As an MSO, you want to know how your business is doing in the respective states, because the rules are different. The customers are different, the pricing are different, the regulations are different, and that presents substantial challenges. How do you evaluate that risk? And when you do, it's normally too late. It's after the fact, after something bad happened, afterward a situation where the coming back from it is cost prohibitive. The tool here is to help people have that visibility before it gets to that point where it's too late, so
Yeah.
you can do something about it, so you can improve your operation, you can reduce your risk and become more valuable or attractive, if you will, to a capital source that wants to invest in this space. And I believe that there are a lot of them. They're just trying to find a way how to do it,
I
and
also
they certainly don't want to do it the way it's been done because of the where we at.
Yeah. I also believe that you're also educating operators on what investors and what creditors deem important too, because I do think there are
Yes.
a lot of first time or new operators, or even new management teams in this industry that have an assumption of what people think are important, and they're off. Like the number one thing that creditors and investors care about is, how do I get what are you going to use the money for and how am I going to get it back? Right. And you look at a pitch deck and those things are typically missing. So it is hopefully an education to the industry on what they should be doing, where they should be focusing, and how they're going to continue to raise the next round of
Right.
cash to grow and scale. And I think that's invaluable. I kind of want to change the conversation. We'll get back to CTrust in a
Sure.
second, but what, you know, I have a general idea of what brought you into this industry. Is this something that you've done? Is this what you built your career on? Is something like this, and then you just decided to bring your skills to cannabis? Kind of give us your backstory.
Yeah, I was introduced to cannabis 2019, early 2019, when CW went into receivership in Nevada. Or at least at that point, the creditors were looking at different, candidates to act as a court-appointed receiver. And I actually built my career and spent most of my life being the guy that goes and fix the problems after the fact, when it is too late, when all options have been exhausted, when the courts is the only place to turn to, where there's really most of the assets, if not all, have dissipated, evaporated. So try to either salvage something or raise the phoenix out of the ashes, or going close to death and trying to revive or sell it in pieces. So I was on a restructuring, turnaround, receivership, distress, liquidation side for most of my life. But for many, many years, even before I was introduced to cannabis, so I asked myself the same question every day. There has to be a better way. Then we must find a better way. We need to help companies avoid these situations, not get into them. So I started looking. I'm a curious guy. I have an engineering background, so I ask questions and I understand processes very well. And I went in and I started looking at what are those common denominators that are happening across the board, across industries, and then more specifically in cannabis since 2019, and analyzing what are those ingredients, if you will, that could potentially result in a company's demise. And we reverse engineered it, and that's like I said, the genesis of CTrust. It takes a team. I didn't do it on my own. We had very talented group of people. We have data scientists. We have programmers. We have technology folks, and people that have been with me for many, many years throughout these receiverships and bankruptcy cases that I've been involved with, and understand, the reasoning behind the formula, right? This whole thing started with a formula that was created from experience of what not to do and what are the symptoms or ingredients that make up a risky company. And we started there. So you build a formula, you kind of test it, you try to figure out whether it works or not. 2 years ago, I would probably be called crazy. It's never going to work. We have
Two
DNB, we
years
have
ago, we were printing money.
well, that but if you did it 2 years ago, I don't think we would have had the same distress today, because we would have learned a lot throughout the process, right? Sometimes, yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit, it could have been valuable 2 years ago, but yes, needless here, no there, the industry needs it today, and everybody feels it. And I think, again, back to your question, the genesis is understanding or reverse engineering the reasons or the components that make up for a failed company, and ultimately generating a formula that later on developed to a technology and a tool that you can see and you can visualize, hence in our names, trust you can see, because it's all the stuff that happens in the background to calculate and run the data through the engine is too complicated to explain. The outcome, is what matters. But we do want to share both with the people that use the score on the lending side and the one on the operator side. We will share the process and the ingredients that make up the score. We also tell operators what are the components that increase their score or decrease or keep it neutral, so they can pay attention to those things. We're not looking to, hide, like FICO, for example. I don't know do you know what make up FICO? Do you know what affects FICO other than your debt ratio?
No clue.
And
None.
paying bills on time, right? These two things that but it has way more components than that. But you're only aware of a couple. We think that transparency goes both ways. They need to learn from the tool that we have. We're not looking to, hide behind a formula, but nevertheless, it is based on years of seeing how people screw up and finding the common denominators and ultimately resulting in a formula that brought us to where we are today.
I, I couldn't agree with you more that if we had this 2 3 years ago when the boom started happening, when I looked at COVID as an accelerant to the cannabis industry. Everybody was shutting their houses. They were starting to experiment with cannabis because they weren't going anywhere. All these regulations
Disposable
came,
income.
disposable income, cannabis companies, there were PPE loans and things like that were coming on, and all of a sudden all these regulations got pushed forward for delivery and drive-throughs and this, that, and the other, and they were deemed essential businesses. And it just seemed that it was going to last forever, and it didn't. And the funny thing about that is when you look at anything that's a startup industry, the last one that maybe we can point out would be a major one would be the internet technology. There's always a bubble. There's always a boom, a bust, and then the actual rise that comes. Sometimes there's a second little bubble, and for some reason this industry likes to pretend that it's decoupled from the world, decoupled from reality, and not. It doesn't follow the history of every other industry. It doesn't have the attributes of every other industry. And I don't, that's the one thing that blows my mind all the time is, industries tend to follow each other. The patterns tend to emerge. Can you predict when they happen? Maybe, maybe not. That's always the hard part. If everyone could predict the bubble, there'd be a lot more rich people. But there are trends that it follows, and that's always been what blows my mind. If we would have had someone like you and a team like CTrust coming in, and as money was starting to be allocated, saying, hey, just so you know, based on the attributes that we see, this is what we think is going to happen. This is who we think is risky. This is who we think is not going to be risky. And it would have been a great experiment to see the track record from there. And I do believe that maybe we wouldn't have had those massive dryouts of capital because investors wouldn't have just been reading headlines. What happens is a couple investors get burned. They talk to their friends. Where we are and who we can collect money from in cannabis is limited compared to the greater overall investor landscape. It is mostly private investors, private funds. It is, we when I was in the family office world, I used to say that it was easier to raise money from institutional funds because they have to allocate it versus private funds like a family office, because their option is always to do nothing. Right. If you're an institutional fund and you raise $50 million, you can't just sit with it in the bank. You got to go deploy 50 million. Yeah. If you're a family office and you have 50 million to deploy, you can hold on to it until you find the right opportunities. You're not obligated to deploy that 50 million. You're not obligated to anybody for that. So, I feel like word of mouth kind of killed it. And if we would have had something that said, hey, although the industry is risky, these are the least risky parts of it, I think we would have continued to see that capital outflow. And then there would have been people who were willing to take chances on bigger risks. And the loans and the equity deals would have just adjusted according to that risk. And I believe you, man. I don't think we'd be where we are if this existed. So I blame you.
I'd like to. You're right on. You're right on. You agree. Look, the good companies suffering from are affected by the bad ones because they're all labeled the same. Unfortunately, the stigma, and I'm not talking about the old stigma of the industry. I'm talking about the financial stigma that they created is across the board. You're in the space, you're in distress, and that's not true. Not everybody is in distress. There are companies that are doing well, and you know what? I challenge them because I think that they should know their score and they should be used as an example and they should be used as someone that you want to try to get to the level of. So if anything, they could be used as a good benchmark for the companies that are trying. Right now, everybody's is doing, whatever they're doing without too much guidance or support from the companies that are available to any other industry, right? Like insurance. Until the government subsidizes and recognizes the industry as an industry like they do with with agriculture, insurance prices are going to go through the roof.
Yeah.
They need to have some changes that obviously are affected by the stigma. And yes, the word on the street right now is cannabis is an opportunity, right? Before it was gold rush, then it became we had the seismic shift from equity to debt, and then everybody pulled back. But now it's starting to become an opportunity. But I agree with you that everybody's waiting for some regulatory adjustments for them to feel comfortable to look at the industry again. And then when they do look at the industry, they are looking for a way to get a third party perspective as to where should we focus on, where should we go first, where should we put our capital, who should we get behind, when our objective is ultimately to preserve as much value in the industry as possible.
Yeah.
Right. So now you can separate the goods from the bad. You can differentiate the good companies from the bad companies, because, like any industry, there's always going to be that. If everybody can be great and everybody can be exposed to debt, that would be ideal. That would be euphoria, but that's unrealistic. And there will be companies that will not survive. Unfortunately, I think that a lot of the companies that we may not know about today are going to be facing it soon, and will be facing a tough situation. Are we going to go into receivership? Are we going to, because bankruptcy is not available, are we going to, walk away with zero equity? Is there anything to salvage? If we can't get money in, we got to cut employees. We can't afford payroll. You know how it goes. It's a
Yeah.
ripple effect from there.
I mean,
We will not be able to help those, but we got to think ahead, because new ones will come behind as capital becomes available, and this needs to become a way for them to communicate risk. They need to have it. We are passionate about this. I think you can hear it in my voice. I want to dedicate the second half of my life to help people avoid bankruptcies, avoid receiverships, avoid court disputes, and keep happy customers and happy investors, by understanding their issues early on and giving them the opportunity to fix them.
I couldn't agree with you more,
Because
man.
if you don't fix it, it doesn't matter. I can't help someone that doesn't want to help himself or herself. But that will allow them at least to say, okay, there's potential train wreck somewhere down the road. I got to do things about it today to make sure it doesn't get there. And that's our passion. That's our mission.
Yeah. I mean, we did that at Heisman, man. We brought somebody in who knew a lot more than us, and they help us make the company last as long as it possibly could. And, I think there is this whole, suits and corporate thing that people are so against in this industry. But at some point, like, these are businesses. Like, maybe the old school suits where maybe they shouldn't have a say in how to grow the weed and what nutrients should go into it and the light. None of us ever want to say in that. But as far as how to operate as a business, how to take advantage of capitalism, how to, run cash flow and everything else, like, it's needed. The education is needed. The general education for this industry is needed, and people need to know their options. I mean, I'm sure there are people, not only that, but those people, when their businesses get affected, their employees get infected, and they're going through this stuff personally themselves. And that's
Yeah.
never fun. I mean, a year ago, we saw massive, massive, massive layoffs from all the biggest companies in the industry, hundreds of people across the board just losing their jobs left and right. And, luckily this year, people started to recover. They started to rehire again, and we're seeing the industry going the other way. But the more and more that there can be transparency and trust in the industry based on some kind of agreed upon thing, which was where CTrust would come in, I think it is more than people having to do their own due diligence. There is a trusted name out there that they can respect. I mean, I remember we would go to a Hall of Flowers, and I would take orders from dispensary upon dispensary, 20, 30, 40, 50 dispensaries. And I remember it wasn't until I would get back to the office and I would enter it into our distributor's software system, and I'd get phone calls. Hey, you can't send it to that dispensary. Why? They got five other brands that have 90-day past due invoices with them. I mean, you can send it, but we don't recommend it, and you're responsible for your own collection. And if it wasn't for my reps from my distributor telling me that specifically, I would have probably sent 10, 15 orders that would have never seen $1 for. And as a company that was struggling with cash flow, that would have wrecked us. So something like this would have been massive for me.
Yeah, I think having visibility or to a certain extent or predictability of future default is valuable for trade. Uh, the trade component alone, just if you're looking to buy a company or you're looking to merge with a company or do a partnership or sell them fertilizers or sell them, you know, clones, whatever that is, having the ability to assess what type of credit you can afford extending, because everybody has different risk appetite, right? What kind of credit you can afford to extend, I think it's extremely valuable. I think that will
Yes.
prevent from the get-go, rather than before you even do a business with someone, maybe if you could someone can guide you as to, well, this should be COD up to net 30, or this is flexible. You guys can negotiate because so the risk of not getting paid is lower, and give the companies the flexibility to decide within that range what works for them. That can save a lot of money down the road, and that's where we see an immediate value. Beyond, there's two types of credits. There's the investment credit and there's the trade credit.
Yeah.
The investment credit is going to be more sophisticated for investors that want to have a wider and deeper visibility into the moving parts of the company they're investing in. But trade credits want to know, I'm going to sell them goods or services. What's the risk of not doing a COD? Nobody can operate on COD 100% of the time. You simply don't have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
So what credit can I extend? And back to what I said, I can see how that plus the visibility into what may happen could save a lot of money, because then
It's
your
funny you say
receivable
that.
value goes down. Yeah.
I have a good friend of mine. Phenomenal marketer, phenomenal brand guy, and he was looking for a new opportunity, and he had a bunch of job offers, and he's very much entrepreneurial, and he kind of shooting the shit, and he goes, "Hey, I really think that I should just scoop up a few of these brands and work independently with all of them. And I'll just be happy doing that. And I'll work with multiple brands of this, that, and the other." And I remember telling him, "I don't think you should do it." And he's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, I'm like, "I love you. And I think you would do a phenomenal job at it. And in any other industry at any other point in time, I 100% would support you. I would maybe even invest in it or do whatever I could to help you. But my fear is because of who you are, how small you are, the fact that you would have to pay a lawyer a significant amount of money on retainer. I think your biggest challenge is going to be collecting money from everybody. And I worry that if you do this on your own, you are going to spend the majority of your time collecting money and not building the brands that you want to work with. And that would be my biggest fear. And that kind of pushed him, or at least, I'm sure he was smart enough to figure it out on his own. It wasn't me, but he went and took a role, a permanent role. And I think there are people that's a true risk that you have to manage, especially if you want to take an entrepreneurial journey in this industry right now. Is how do you work with your customers? I have another friend who wanted to do cleaning products, sanitization and pest control. And I remember him talking to me. I'm like, dude, you kind of have to do net 30, or like you have to do COD, because I don't trust anyone to actually pay you. And especially unless you have money behind you to collect, like I don't see it being a very easy thing to do. So, something like this again tells you who you should be working for, who should you extend, invoice credit to. And that is incredible in this industry because we don't have it. Everything is just kind of a trust, right? Shoddy put together contracts, handshake deals, and everything else, just because we're all new and we're all trying to figure it out together. I love hearing about the company and everything else. You have on your board a dear friend of mine. So I'd love to know, how did you get connected with Bob Hoban?
Oh, I tell everybody that that was a love at first sight, but I think Bob will deny it. It's at MJ Biz, actually, at the same place, the same wine bar that we did our announcement.
Very
How
cool.
nostalgic is that?
Very cool.
That's what
Yeah.
we made. So, and we thought about it when we wanted to do our short a small get together. We were introduced by a dear friend of mine, Scott Rutledge. He
Good
was
guy.
a team. He was on a team. He was the first one I reached out to, because coming into the space, I knew nothing and I knew no one. I knew what I had to do in my capacity as a receiver, but I didn't have the knowledge it needed to understand what I'm dealing with. So Scott was, we hit it off right away, and he helped me assemble the team and educate me on the industry. And I learned a lot from Scott and everybody that he brought to the team. And we had a great success in rebuilding and selling the assets of the estate. And and so Scott thought, hey, you and Bob should know each other. And after we were introduced at this bar that I mentioned, Bob said, hey, let's do a series about receivership. Let's talk about that. This is something that everybody needs to learn because it could become an issue. And that was 2 years ago. And that's the point. He had the vision. Bob had the vision, knowing ahead of time what the industry
Yeah.
needs to be educated on. And only now, 2 years later, 2 years plus, they're starting to talk about it. It's becoming an issue. We did put the webinar together. I thought it was great. Bob is a great host, as you know, and I think you two should get together and
We
have a.
so I love Bob. I love Bob and Halston, his right hand there.
Yeah, oh yeah, she's
Halston was
awesome.
one of my first friends that I made in the industry. We met at the NCIA conference in San Jose, I want to say 2019. And I introduced myself to her, and she just opened up her network and started introducing me to people left and right. I had not had this show yet. I wouldn't start this show for probably another year and a quarter. And I started the show. And before I'd ever reached out to, all of a sudden I get an email to an email address that I don't use for work, but I guess I must have signed up for YouTube or something with it. And I get an
Yeah.
email, and it's Bob Hoban, and we link up, and he goes, hey, I just want to reach out to you and see if you wanted to be on my podcast. And I'm like, yeah. So wait, you want me to be on your show? Like, yeah. Now I had
Yeah,
not done anything professionally in the industry besides just doing this show. And he's like, I think you have a great opinion of Florida. I love the way that you talk. I want you to be on my show. I'm like, cool. I'm like, do you want to be on my show? He's like, oh yeah, that'd be great. He had no intention, like, because I had other people who were smaller and everything else who would reach out to me. Hey, do you want to be on my show? We can be on your show. Blah blah blah. Bob had
right,
no
right.
intent. He wasn't trying to self promote. He wasn't trying to get another spot for him. He had just reached out and asked if I wanted to. Um, every time I've gone out to
How
Denver,
awesome
they
is
put
that? How
he's
awesome is
the
that?
best. He hosts me in his office. I remember one day they had bought a bunch of new equipment. They bought these mics and everything that I had recommended to Halston, and they came in. They're like, "You got to try out the new equipment." And me and Bob and Eric were sitting there sipping whiskey and just BSing on the microphones for like an hour and a half, and it was so much fun. And then even Scott's great too. Scott,
Yeah.
he knows me as two different
Sorry, the
people.
dog.
It's what what's that?
I said the dog. He was starting
Oh
to make noises like he's about to make noises. So I'm
no,
being
we
this
embrace
is yeah. I'm notifying him of its potential risk.
Got it. We embrace chaos on this show. But
Yes.
yeah,
Sorry about that.
Scott knows me as two different people. He knows me as the podcast guy, and then it wasn't until this last MJ Biz that he forgot that we were working on a major project together. So I helped launch Ricky Williams' brand Heisman, and Scott and Chris were supposed to be the people who helped us build out the first Heisman house. So it's funny because we had this whole one conversation and we had talked about a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, Scott, I don't know if you remember this. You guys were going to build out the first Heisman house. He's like, oh, shit. He's like, wait, you're the same person? I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh, and, we kind of
It's a
rekindled
small
over that.
industry after all, right? It's a
Yeah.
small industry after all.
But you were working with some great people, man. I
I'm
like to
very
give them the
fortunate.
flowers.
I absolutely, like I said earlier, I don't know if you picked up on it. I will emphasize it for anybody listening. It takes a village. It whatever we can have the best idea, the best experience. We can everything check, check, check. But it takes an effort. This is a team effort. This is not going to work unless everybody is on board with the mission.
Yeah.
And that's true for anything. This industry takes a village, and the reason why I think this industry can beat the odds is because I think if they set their mind to it, there's a lot of great people in the space. I met amazing people: Bob, Scott, you, Kevin, Matt, and I keep going and on and on. And I don't want to offend anyone, but there's a lot of amazing people in the space, and I think that everybody puts their mind to it, I think we can beat the odds. We can be the startup that proven Harvard's research to be wrong.
Agreed, man. I started this show because I believe that the people and the entrepreneurs in this space were
Yeah.
more resilient than almost any other industry I saw
It's
because of all.
amazing
Yeah,
in a lot of aspects, not just resiliency, but also, of course, creativity. Um,
that's the weed. It helps us be
that
creative.
and there's a research. I guess there's a documentary out there. I heard about the correlation between cannabis and creativity. There's a documentary out there. There was an event that I attended, and I heard the producer, and I thought it's interesting. I haven't watched it, but certainly there is a correlation there. Uh, but I do believe that there's a way out. Anyway, I'm trying to give dose of optimism. We're not there to have got you moment. We're there to help create and preserve value.
And I agree and I support that, man. Well, we are getting close to the hour here. Dotan, this is great conversation. I'm excited to continue to see you guys grow
Likewise.
and expand and become the de facto standard for the industry. I know that we have partnered together in our businesses. I'm very excited about that. I think there's more we're going to do together. Hopefully we'll host some great events together, do some great content together. But
Sure.
what do we looking forward? We're about to approach 2024. 2023 has come to an end. Luckily, it was much better than 2022. As far as the industry itself, what excites you about next year? What are some of the things you're looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to banks making loans to
Yeah, me
companies.
too.
I'm looking forward to that. I want to see banks, regional banks, supporting their communities, supporting their companies, and helping the companies that really can and want to help themselves. I think that would be exciting. I would love to see that.
You and me both, and I promise you, I don't know if I can promise you, but I
I
can
don't think
tell
you can
you
promise anything, but yeah.
by the end of 2024, if banks are not lending to cannabis companies, Todd Rosales may not have a job at Green Check Verified anymore. So
Well,
it might have to happen.
we certainly have the motivation now.
We do have the
So
motivation.
we
So
got the
banks keep
motivation.
me employed. But no,
We got
I
the
think
motivation.
the more and more that the banks can support the industry before any kind of regulation changes, it is huge. And I think it sends a message to the government and everything else that this industry is here. It's here to stay. We need to support it. And we're doing everything we can to do that. And Dotan, I'm excited that you guys are around. Like I said, I'm excited for the partnership and to see what you guys do. And maybe we'll do this again at Benzinga in April.
Thank you, Todd. I really appreciate having me. This was a great pleasure, and you got a great platform, and I'm looking forward to this partnership as well.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you very much. And thank you to everybody at home for watching. Of course, if you missed any part of this interview and you'd like to check it out, you can find it at youtube.com/elevate your grind, youtube.com/elevate your grind, or you can watch or listen to the audio version anywhere you download your podcast, Spotify, Apple, iHeart, etc., etc. For all things C-Lab, check out joinclab.com. I don't know. This might be the last one we add. Maybe there's one more before the end of the year, but if we don't see you, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and we'll see you next time.